Hey guys, welcome back to Two Girls, One Cut. This is our first official episode um, on our, what would you guys call it? Our newly
Developed.
developed,
Mhm.
renovated, um, awakened
Yeah.
Nighthawk
Oh,
Radio.
nice. Way to go. Way to
Awakened,
throw that in
right,
there.
right. We gotta add in the awakening radio in there. Um, So, what is it starting this week? We're going to have live radio
Yes.
on nighthawk-radio.com. Check out Awakening Radio on Sunday at 7 o'clock with Joe and Tracy.
Yeah, boy.
Uh, yeah, him right there.
Me. This
Um,
guy.
and then you can also check us out on Nighthawk Radio Facebook page. Make sure you type it into your search bar, all one word. We also have a fan page now. It's a Nighthawk Radio fan group. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Nighthawk Radio.
Very
Um,
important things. Yes.
Yes, yes. You can also call with any complaints, comments, any questions at 606-657-0961. We've got a slew of other podcasts, other podcasters. Another being the McKinsey Hour. It'll show on Thursdays at 8 o'clock, starting on the 11th, not this Thursday, but next Thursday. We will be going live every Thursday at 7. Um, and so that kind of brings me into our first episode. We're going to be talking about Samuel Little. And Chad McKenzie was actually the one that asked us if we knew who that was. And Chad is the host of the McKenzie Hour. And me and Abs were like, who's that? Like, we never
Mm-mm.
heard of him. And he is actually named the most prolific serial killer in the U.S., with the most confirmed murders,
Yeah.
which brings his number up to 60.
Oh,
He was,
wow.
yeah, 60. Um, he confessed to 93 murders, but 60 of those were actually confirmed, which completely blows my mind. Like, how do you even
He's
remember that you
busy.
killed that many people? Or like the
Well,
exact.
I don't know what all you watched or read or whatever,
Mhm.
but one thing that I did notice with Samuel Little is he had a photographic memory.
Memory, and he
Like
would, yes, draw pictures.
he would literally know them, their names, their
Yeah.
heights, their weights, little intimate things about them.
Mhm.
And this, when he was being questioned about these, we're talking 30 years post
Mhm.
crime. And
Yeah.
then, this man is, well, he was, when he was confessing, he was like 74, 75 years old and able to
Right.
go back in time in his mind and remember
He's like, "Yeah, that happened
when, where, what year.
1972." Yeah, yeah.
And
Yes,
with
absolutely.
um, one, you guys said this guy kind of reminds you of Fred Sanford.
Fred Sanford, down
Mhm.
to it, the
You know,
instant I saw him, I
from
was like,
Sanford
oh
and
my God,
Son. Yeah.
Elizabeth.
But okay, with him being able to recall things 30 years ago,
Hmm.
does that, in my mind, that tells me that this guy could be borderline genius.
Oh,
And when you get to that point, where does your mind of reality end and the
stop. Yes,
psychotic mind start?
Mhm.
correct.
Um, and how many serial killers are very, very intelligent up into the
Dennis
genius
Rader.
range?
Yes, Dennis
So,
Rader was like that. The Green River Killer was like that.
yeah,
Like they all have a lot of those qualities.
yeah, several, many more than not.
Yeah.
You do have the occasional idiot serial killer. I mean, who's just not smart. Richard Ramirez, for one. I mean,
Right.
Mhm.
he wasn't smart at all. But,
Right. I
you
believe
do
that.
have the Dennis Raiders. You do have the John Wayne Gacy's, the Ted Bundys, who are Manson,
Mm-hmm.
crazy intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, just as an outsider looking in, where does, your normal mind stop and the psychotic mind begin? Or is
Maybe
there
that's where the
no,
breakdown is. Maybe
yeah,
that in and
is
of
there
itself is where
no,
the breakdown is.
is that where the moral compass breaks down? Where you're the part of your brain that has the emotion to say, hey, let's not kill this person. It's not the right thing to
Not
do.
right.
They have no
Right.
conscience.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and what's great about this is that a lot of times I can figure out who you guys are going to do. But this guy, I'm totally in the dark.
You didn't know about him
Totally,
either,
I
which
don't.
is so crazy because he's literally been named the most prolific serial killer.
I feel like I have let the world down.
I know,
He's
me too.
also, well,
I
he's
don't
also
think.
affiliated with Ohio.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. He
So he's an
committed
Ohio guy. He was
multiple
definitely within
murders.
our, yep, and he was definitely within our generation. He did all
Hmm.
of his crimes like in the 80s and 90s.
So it
Um,
happened. He confessed to committing 93 murders between 1970 and 2005. So
right.
like,
That's a long time.
yes,
That's
and
a
it's like, how
long
did
time.
nobody know
That's like
about him?
BTK
Like, how do
law.
we not know about him?
I don't know.
You know?
But on
I don't know.
steroids because he didn't have long periods where he didn't
So he had no
commit
cooling off
crimes.
period.
Hmm. Yeah,
His
no,
So,
he never
whole
really
his
had.
whole
and
thing.
okay, he
Except for if he went to
confessed.
jail.
So he
Hmm.
confessed to 60 some murders,
Hmm.
He
which
can
means
he confessed to
in,
93
oh, to
murders.
confess to 93. So in my mind, that means there could probably be 300.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yep.
Because, as you guys know, serial killers only let you know how many they killed so they can get a thrill out of it.
Hmm.
So how many was he holding back on
Right.
for sometime later down the road before he died,
Hmm.
for either an appeal or for, hey, the media has forgot about me, let's throw out a couple more bodies.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
well, let's get into the meat of this thing. Let me know what this guy did.
Yeah. So, like I said, it happened between 1970 and 2005. He's also known as um, Mr. Sam, and they also call him the choke and stroke killer, uh, which is it's a funny one,
That
right?
sounds like
It's a
how
funny
pornos get
one.
started.
I know, it's a funny one. But I mean, it makes sense because he would strangle his victims, and that's how he would get off. Like
hmm.
that's how he would get aroused. Um,
So it was literally choke
Literally
and
choke
stroke.
and stroke. Yep, exactly. So
Well,
let's start. What is it?
with that, I mean, how many serial killers that, and often more than not, that it's not the thrill of the kill, it is the
It's
sexual fantasy
truly,
of the kill.
yes. And also, it's kind of, I think, like the adrenaline of he would choke his victims and just to the point where they're getting ready to pass out, and he would let them come back
Again,
because
a porno.
yeah,
I mean,
right. Yep,
I mean,
yep.
that's
It's
so,
just
Control.
control. Yep, yep,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
yep. Because it's literally like I have your life in my hands.
At any
I can
time, I
take
can
your
end it.
life anytime I want.
Yeah.
Um, so let's start back at the beginning. So he was born June 7th, 1940, in Reynolds, Georgia. Um, his mother, she was only 16 years old whenever she gave birth to him. Her name was Bessie May. Um, and Bessie May's mother actually died giving birth to her.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So she was raised by her grandmother, Josephine.
Yeah.
Um, so she had him at 16. with a guy named Paul McDowell. He was 19, and he was actually having like a little bit of a contest with some friends. Let's see, who can seduce the most amount of girls in our area. So this little town, Reynolds, Georgia, I think it only had like 800 some people.
It's a small town even today. Yeah.
Yes, it was a small town, and it was also like a very impoverished town. There wasn't there wasn't a whole lot of jobs, and you got to think like this was 1940, right before the war started. So people were living in poverty for sure. So anyway, so Bessie May, she gave birth at home with her grandmother, Josephine. She kind of acted as the midwife, but Grandma Josephine was very embarrassed. She felt scandalized that Bessie got pregnant at 16 years old out of wedlock, because that was not the norm then. And she actually hoped that the baby would be stillborn. She did not want her to have this baby. And I think that Josephine kind of implanted it into her head that this baby, that there's nothing good going to come of this baby.
Right.
So Bessie May and one of her friends, they put some kind of rope around her belly. And Bessie May pulled one side, the friend pulled the other, and they were trying to squeeze her belly so hard that it would kill the baby.
Well, there you go. There's the problem.
I know,
Show
I
over.
know. I
Show
know.
over.
Stir
Wow.
a little turpentine.
And that's what I was going to
Turpentine.
say. But that
Yeah.
obviously didn't work. So she tried
Nope.
to drink turpentine.
Yep.
Wow.
That also didn't work.
I guess a good
No.
old fashioned coat hanger wasn't. I mean,
No,
Nope.
that makes me cringe.
yeah, no kidding.
Ugh. So anyway, so she went on to have this baby, and Josephine, helped Bessie May through it. But after the baby was born, the baby was not stillborn, and Josephine whispered in the baby's ear, "I curse you. I curse you." So she was like wishing harm upon this baby. She was cursing this baby.
So this guy never
He did
really
not
stood
have
a
a chance.
chance.
He
in
did not
life,
have a chance.
Period.
No, not whatsoever. Yep. So the grandmother also would not allow Bessie May to name the baby. So she said, "You're not naming this baby. You're not keeping this baby." No. So, Bessie May did the best she could for about 6 months. After about 6 months, Josephine kicked Bessie May and the baby out. She said, "You are not to come back with this baby." So Bessie May leaves, and
And to put that in context, I mean, you think in the 40s,
yeah.
To have a child out of wedlock was a huge no-no.
Oh,
Period.
yeah.
Um,
So,
you know,
like I said, Grandma Josephine, she was very embarrassed.
yeah,
She was like, "This is a big scandal. People are talking about me, because her granddaughter is a depiction of her,
right, exactly. And you are the family, or people see you as a representation of your family.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So she felt like that was, shedding bad light on her. So Josephine leaves with the baby, or not Josephine, Bessie May leaves with the baby. And from what I understand, Bessie May is recounting all of these moments with Samuel Little as he's older. So she kind of, tells him what happens. And so this is all from Samuel's point of view. This is what he has been told.
Right.
So they get thrown out, and she's walking. It's raining, it's pouring, and she walks for a couple of hours, and then she finds like an abandoned home. Or I think I heard that it was a house on stilts because it was an area that flooded.
Right.
So she kind of got underneath of the stilts, and she laid there and she fell asleep. she wakes up a couple hours later and she's like, what am I going to do? Like, I mean, she's 16 years old, you know,
Right.
it is kind of like, what do you do in an instance like that? And so she decides to leave the baby there in the mud, and she goes back home to Josephine. And about an hour later, and she leaves the baby in the mud by the road. So about an hour later, someone comes driving by. His name is Quint. And
From Jaws?
no, not from Jaws, but that's his name. And he is driving, I don't really know, a small merchant's cart
Part. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
that is being pulled by a goat.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is a man that has no legs.
Correct.
What? Hang on.
He's
hang on.
riding
I got to see this guy.
in the cart with the goat,
The goat pulling
selling
the cart.
produce.
Yep.
Y'all just
Yeah.
blew
Here's
my
a baby
mind.
crying.
And he hears a baby crying. So he gets out of the cart on, you know, walking
His
with his
nuts.
knuckles. Yep.
On
He's
his
walking with it.
snaps.
Well, he walks with his hands, you know,
Yeah.
is what I'm
There's
imagining.
so many
Um,
jokes there, but I'll leave it
Yep.
alone.
Yep. You just stop there.
I'll
This
stop.
isn't Awakening Radio yet.
Okay, you're right. Yes, ma'am.
This is Two Girls, One Cut. We like to keep it
I
clean.
understand.
Well,
As clean as
well,
a cut can
as-
be.
I'm thinking
right.
some kind
No.
of stripper pole,
Not
fishing
there.
for
Oh,
sharks
no.
and shit.
No.
Right.
So
Okay.
anyway, so Quint,
The legless man on
the
the
legless man.
goat
on-
pulled cart.
That's right. That's right. He starts walking on his knuckles over the baby. He gets the baby. I'm not quite sure because I can't imagine holding a baby and walking on one hand.
Without legs.
Tracy, stop it.
So all of this is just happening the best it can happen. He's scooting
I'm
He's
just telling you the
on one
stuff that's
hip
running through my
with
mind.
the
I
babe
can't
in his
stop it.
arm,
That's
and
right.
he scooted back to his goat-driven cart,
And he's able to get
and he's holding the
hike
babe
that
in
babe.
his two good arms,
Uh-huh.
and he
gets that
rides the
babe.
goat cart
Mhm.
into town.
Oh, that poor
Well,
goat.
but he notices this baby. He knows.
Oh yeah, he recognizes it's
He
who his daddy
recognizes
is.
this baby, yes. And
Mhm.
he's like, well, this is Bessie Mae's baby. Bessie
Uh-huh.
Mae's baby that she, you know, she
Got
got
out of
impregnated
wedlock. Yeah,
by Paul
Mr. McDowell.
It's kind of like the
Yeah.
firecracker that you throw away and the dog grabs it and brings it
And
back
runs it back to you. Yes. Yes.
Stop
Yes,
it,
it is.
Tracy. Be good.
Oh my gosh.
Good. So
Not a chance he
anyway,
had.
so Quint, he knows that this baby belongs to Paul McDowell, and he's thinking, well, Bessie Mae done abandoned this baby. We're not taking this baby back to Bessie Mae. We're
Mm-mm.
going to go take it to Paul McDowell's house. So he takes the baby to Paul McDowell's house, and it's
His mother and dad.
Yep, Fanny and Henry. That's mother and dad of Tracy. What are you doing?
Sometimes them things hurt my ears and I got to kind of pull them out a little
You
bit.
got to fiddle with them, huh?
Yeah, till they get them right. I'm still thinking about this dude on his nubs and the
I
goat,
know. It's a
The
lot
goat
to
part.
swallow.
sharks and
That's not
We
something you
have
hear
to-
every day. But
No
we have to
kidding.
give the details as we know them to be correct
listen,
so that
and
you can draw your own conclusion as to how these things
Exactly.
happen.
I appreciate
our job.
every aspect of that.
That's
but
our job.
also, what a wonderful man. Just
Right?
driving by on his little goat-driven
Big cart.
car.
His
little
little
boy.
legless goat cart.
I know. And he's like, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to pick up this baby and I'm going to get myself and this baby back in this cart, and I'm going to take a break from selling my produce and
Yep.
take this baby to
And
Fanny and
return
Henry.
it. Return it to
Yes.
Fanny and Henry.
What
Yes.
a guy.
So he goes and Fanny and Henry are like, yes, we'll take this baby in. And they named the baby Samuel.
Samuel Little.
Yep. Well, it would have been Samuel McDowell,
Yeah.
I
Right.
think is what they named him, but he kind of took over his mom's last name.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure where that came into play or why or how, and I know that he like rekindled kind of a little bit of a relationship with his mom later down the
That's a
road.
whole other story. We'll get into
Yeah,
that in a
we'll
minute.
get into that. Yep. So shortly after this, Paul, the father, decides he's going to enlist in the army. He doesn't want nothing to do with his baby. He didn't want anything to do with it from the beginning.
Right.
So he leaves. He goes into the army. So in 1942, so baby Samuel would have been like a year and a half, two. Henry, the grandfather, moves to Ohio and he finds some factory work. And then in 1944, Henry has saved up enough money to move both Fanny and Sam to Lorain, Ohio. So that's kind of where they settle down. And then Fanny and Henry kind of they told their neighbors around them that Sam was their son, and that's kind of it, and it just kind of happened, I guess.
Yeah.
And then in 1945, so about a year later, Paul returns home from the war, and he's like, "Yeah, that's my brother. That's not my son."
And
And
you
so
know
they
what? That would save them the embarrassment of,
Mhm.
exactly,
the
yep.
out of wedlock. Yeah.
Yep. So that's what they did. They were like, yeah, this is our son and this is Paul's brother. And then so Paul gets married and over like the next decade, he has 7 kids with his wife. And so little Sam, he has 7 cousins as he thinks they are, and they
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
grow up together and um, they have some extended family move up from Georgia to Ohio. And so kind of like they're the biggest portion of their family is now in Ohio. Because I guess Ohio just had better economic opportunities than what Georgia did.
Yeah. With them being on the Lake area up there, there was a lot of steel work and
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
that up there.
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of factories. Um, so Sam was raised to believe that his parents were Fanny and Henry. Um, and it kind of seemed like they were like loving as he was like a child, but then once he kind of got into his, you know, 10, 11, 12 preteen years,
Preteen. Yeah.
yeah, they were a little bit more neglectful. And I kind of wonder if like they meant well, but they just kind of weren't really like competent parents, if that makes sense. And that's
Not
probably
loving. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Very
Um,
distant. And again, I mean,
mhm,
we're talking about the 40s and 50s where,
right.
out of wedlock children were unheard of.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when they were heard of, they were very shunned.
right, exactly. And so yeah, I guess he was just like a little bit neglected and Samuel actually claims when he was 5 years old that his uncle molested him and he would bribe him with money. They were very poor, so his uncle would say, here's you some money to keep quiet.
Keep quiet. Yeah.
Mhm. And then when he was about 8 years old, he became infatuated with his teacher, Miss Harris. And I guess she wore scarves a lot and she would always like adjust her scarf and touch her neck. And he became infatuated with
So
that.
the choke part, there's
So that
the
I feel like that's
fascination.
kind of, yeah, that's kind of where it came into play. He was always kind of a class clown in school. He didn't get it wasn't very good at school. He wouldn't get very good grades, and it
He
wasn't
was the
because he
smelly
wasn't
kid.
smart.
And
It
he
was
was the
just
smelly kid
he
as
was a
well.
smelly kid. Yep. He
Yeah.
girls would tease him. He said other kids would tease him, but especially girls. And it
Hmm.
might have just been because he noticed the girls more than the boys.
Right. Yeah.
And so then he would tease the girls back, and he would always be the one to get in trouble. So he became very frustrated with, I guess, how girls were treated versus
His
the boys.
interaction, well,
Yeah,
yeah, and his interaction with women
yeah,
has always been, Yeah.
Well,
Not
that's
great.
what I was
Yeah.
sitting here thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, not to fast forward, but I wonder how many of his victims were women versus men.
All of
Well,
them.
we could easily
They were all
say, yeah,
women.
like
All of
97%.
them.
Okay, there
Yeah,
you go.
because I believe that in the mix there was a someone who we now know as like who's transitioned from
Hmm.
Man to woman.
male to female.
Right.
And then I think there may have been another male in there, but I think it was just by happenstance, really. I don't
Right.
think
Right.
it
Kind of maybe
wasn't
just
a,
happened.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And he actually said, quote, "My grandma didn't really watch over me. I would go to school with dirty, raggedy clothes." So, he would go to school dirty, stinky, smelly, and that's just how kids are. Kids are mean, you
Sure.
know. And then he said that he was just really ashamed for girls to see him. And he said, "I wanted to hold them and touch them. And the older that I got, the stronger the desires got. The
Hmm.
desires turned into drives for him, like a
Mm.
driving force for him. Um, and he loved females, but was hurt by the things that they did." And then as he starts to go into like teen years, he started collecting true crime magazines,
Sound
depicting,
familiar?
but it was
BTK?
mostly depicting the strangulation of women.
Again, BTK.
Okay, yep.
Yeah.
Um, and then he kind of just got in a lot of trouble. He was sent to juvie in 1956. Um, and then he also, when he was 18 years old, he got caught removing batteries at night out of vehicles and selling them. He'd make a whole 75 cents off of each one of them batteries. Um,
Well, back
and
then, that
then,
would buy you a tank of gas, a pack of cigarettes, and
yeah,
And,
right.
uh,
and a
Yeah,
true
you're
crime
right.
mag.
yeah, the
Yeah,
true crime mag. That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep, that's right. Um, and then anytime that he would get in trouble, um, at home or, with the law or whatever, he would, his parents, his parents would call Paul, his brother,
Right.
um, and Paul would come over and he would beat the ever living shit out of Sam. Um,
Mm.
and so Sam was talking to his cousins one day, and he's like, "Why? Like, I don't understand why my parents always call Paul over here to punish me. Like, why do they want him to beat me? Why don't they punish me?" And the cousin was like, "That's because he's your
Your
dad."
dad.
Yeah. And so Sam asked Fanny, his, mother,
Right.
and she was like, "Yeah, yeah, that is true. We're your grandparents." And that kind of just sent him into a rage. And since he
I
was
wonder
in this rage, he was
at
just,
what age that he was
I
at
think
this
that was
point.
about 15. I
Okay.
think I read that was at 15.
Yep.
And that was 15.
Yeah.
And so he was in a rage, probably just, losing his mind inside the house, maybe throwing things. I'm not really sure. But it escalated to the point where Henry ended up hitting him in the head with a fire poker. And so Samuel, he retaliates and he gets Henry in a headlock and he tries to strangle him. And Fanny starts to panic. She's crying. She's begging for her husband's life. So because of that, and because like she was probably the person that I guess cared for him the most,
Right.
he listened and he let go of him. Um, but I think maybe that was like kind of like the last straw for him. Kind of what really sent him spiraling. Um,
Sure. I mean, here these people, that aren't the best caretakers have also lied to you your entire
yeah.
life.
Yep.
And they would have who you knew to be your brother, but it was really your dad, come over and just beat the shit out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and keep all of these terrible lies from you.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get it. I think it was about that time that he committed the
The
crime that
breaking and
actually,
entering,
yeah, put him in the Ohio Men's Reformatory.
the
And
juvenile.
and I'm pretty
center.
sure that he did the most time that he ever did for any crime that he was ever convicted of for that B&E at that Ohio penitentiary.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
he did several years, and then throughout his adult life, he had some pretty serious convictions and would literally get like 2 years a
I know.
year for like sexual assaults
So
and
basically, he spent most of
aggravated
his
murder.
teen years in either a juvie home or some kind of reformatory.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of them.
And like Abby was saying, like, I think a lot of those, that happened after he found out that the parents weren't really his parents, they were grandparents. So I definitely think that kind of sent him
Played
into
a
a
mental
spiral.
part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so he got sent to juvie in 1956. So he's 16. And then I don't really know what happens between 56 and 60, but I'm assuming he spent a lot of those years in the juvenile
Locked up.
detention
Right. Yeah.
center and then, moved on to, prison or jail or whatever. But in the 60s, he decides to move to Florida to live with his mother. Um, so yeah, it kind of does make sense. I guess I'm just now putting that together. He gets out
So
of
his mother, yes, his mother um had reached out to him and was basically like, come stay with me. Let's try to build a relationship. I don't know you, but I want to know you.
okay.
And she kind of ran like kind of like a boarding house for people there. And she was the manager. And so she would rent rooms out to people. Well, so she gave Sam his own room. It was a room close to her room. And that room actually had a peephole cut out of the wall from her room looking into his room that he didn't know about. So she could keep an eye on him or whatever. So she had a very inappropriate um, way about her with him, which was strange to me. But she would offer him all kinds of sexual favors. She was always trying to make for sure that he was satisfied and would like turn him on to women. And that was actually where he killed his first victim at, was in his mother's boarding house,
Oh, wow.
in the room that she was renting him. Um, she was not there and she was not peeping at that
That's what I was
time.
gonna say. Was she watching?
No, but she, after that happened and he disposed of her, and I don't really know which one that was or the details. I should have looked it up, but I didn't. That was whenever it got real weird with her, and basically he said that he would wake up and she would be in his bed and she would be, trying to offer him all of these favors. And he said, I felt bad for her. I felt sorry for her, like she's lonely or there's something not quite right with her.
So mom
So
was a little freak too.
mom was a little
Oh,
freak
see, I
too.
didn't know all that.
So basically, he denied he denied doing anything that she offered, but it was, that kind of weird ass relationship, I guess, that she set out to have with him that maybe got him rolling in his own likes and dislikes. But he said a lot. Ever since I was 10 or 11, I just wanted to feel them and touch them, women.
Hmm.
And then I started, fantasizing about my hands around their throat, what what their throat would feel like when they swallowed,
Mm-hmm.
like all of these really strange things. And when his mother died, he had just gotten this relationship with her, I guess, and she lived a few years while he was there. And when she died, that was pretty much whenever he was like game on and
Mm-hmm.
started to really take off and like give in to the desires and fantasies and what have you that he's had. And then it was, multiple women per month, and not just your one here and there, but like literally all he could get. Bars, frequented, establishments, bars, um, places that were probably laden with drug addicts and whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And I feel like he was one, a very nice looking man in his youth. Two, he
Yeah, he
was
really was
also
when he was younger.
yeah, he was a boxer. Like he learned
Mm-hmm.
how to box while he was in
In
prison.
prison. Yep.
And so he kind of would use that on the street, to like
Mm-hmm.
make a little money, defend himself,
Yep.
do whatever. So he was intimidating. He was nice looking. He seemed to be kind of a bigger framed man at that time. And that was whenever he really took off with,
The
his desires.
confidence. Yeah, and the
Yep.
confidence. Yep.
So
But you
then
can
he
kind
kind
of
of,
see where almost, I don't want to say a hatred for women would come from, but maybe,
there's certainly a distrust.
Oh,
yes,
for
a
sure.
distrust and not really, maybe even a fascination with
Oh,
women.
yes.
Um,
I
he's
agree with
had
that.
all these mixed signals from everything from abandonment to now your mom is over loving to the point to where it's
It's creepy.
creepy, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and then
Um,
also his grandmother lying to him for years and years and years.
yeah, and so yeah, it goes back to distrust.
And then all the girls, teasing him, making fun of him when he was
Right, and
younger.
I think of Jack the Ripper. I mean, his
Mm-hmm.
his main MO was to kill or to cut the genitals of women,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which
Mutilate them.
was yeah, I mean to the point to where it was an almost a white hot hatred for women.
Yeah.
But again, it was a fascination with women. It's kind
Mhm.
of like you've got those two balls
You
and they're
love
constantly
them.
trying to
You
keep
hate
them.
them. You
Yeah,
can't live
yeah.
without them.
You're keeping those balls in the air at the same time, and you either kill them or
You're going to
love them.
drop them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he also got into a relationship with a woman who was probably 20 or 25 years his senior. And he, for the duration of her life from that point on, they were a couple. And she kind of served, I feel like, a lot of different things for him. She was his lover, she was his friend. She acted kind of like his mother.
I say
She would
Mm-hmm.
probably
get
yeah, a
him
mother figure. Yeah.
she would get him out of trouble. Like she would go to court for different things and testify, purge herself, lie on the stand and say, there's no way that he could have been here because he was here with me. And I'm this, older, established African American woman. I have no reason to lie to you about his whereabouts whenever she knew that he was certainly not with her.
Yeah.
So he had this ongoing relationship for years and years and years with this old woman, basically,
Mm-hmm.
that helped, facilitate him, clean up his messes, get him out of messes. When he would go to jail, she would be the one to pick him up. She would keep him in money on his books. She did everything for
Uh,
him.
you got to respect a
And
lady who keeps your commissary filled.
right, right. I mean, you have to have soups when you're in jail, you know,
Cookies.
cookies and soups. So every time he would get turned out, she would be right there at the gate waiting for him. And there were several times that that would occur. And literally the night he would get out, he would commit murder.
Yeah.
Like the day he would get out,
Yeah.
he would be
Prison
like,
didn't scare him.
no.
So this guy really I mean, as most serial killers do, have a cooling off period. This guy had no cooling off period.
No.
He went straight from
Mm-mm.
one to another.
Yeah.
Right. Whenever they were passing out what's the word? A
Conjugate,
conscience? No,
conscience.
yes, when they were passing out
Whatever it
consciences,
was, he didn't have it.
Yes.
souls, they skipped him.
Oh, for
He
I
sure.
mean,
had none. Yes.
he
Well, I
was
think that the
taken.
mother squeezed it out of him
Right. Or turpentined it.
or turpentined it out of him. Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
Because he
yeah,
had none.
and
Hmm.
you know,
Or
it's
cursed it.
Or, yeah, it
that's what
was
I was
cursed
getting
out
at.
of
Yeah,
him
the
from,
curse.
yep,
You
Grandma
know,
Josephine.
Yep.
listen, I am a firm believer in curses on people,
Hmm.
I
especially generational curses.
Yeah.
well,
Um, you know, uh, so it sounds like this guy.
it's a real thing.
He had no chance.
Chance but
Period.
to
Mm-mm.
be what he was.
He
And
come
he
out
said
fighting and had to fight his entire life.
Yep.
his family, everything. He said in an interview one time, and I found this to be kind of interesting, but they got on the subject of God, and she asked him, do you feel like that you were forgiven for your sins? This is him sitting in the penitentiary with 3 consecutive lives for the 3 that he got convicted of before he started spilling his guts on all the other stuff. And he said, absolutely. He said, God was with me when I did all of this. God allowed me to be the person that I am. Of course, he's going to forgive me. And I just think to myself, what kind of sad soul, skewed
Religion.
thinker
Yeah.
can come up with that as an okay answer to
That's an
it? Like,
explanation. Yeah.
yeah,
And again,
Yeah.
what?
we're talking to the deepest part of the mind. Um,
Right. Because you can't lie to yourself. You can lie
no.
to everyone else and you can do all these things, but to justify that in your heart and your mind, that's a little messy, I feel
Mhm.
like. So, yeah. So then he just basically went on a killing spree all along from Florida to LA,
Yes.
and stops
So he
along
was
the
He
a
way.
traveler.
Oh,
And
he was
along the
definitely
way,
a
he
traveler.
also so by 1975, he would have been 35 in
Hmm.
1975. He was arrested 26 times in
Hmm.
11 different states for theft, assault, DUI, fraud, um, rape, attempted rape, shoplifting,
Hmm.
um, assault on government officials, you name it. Um, and I think the longest sentence he got of all of those was
3 years.
3 years for
Yeah,
breaking into a furniture store.
So
right.
basically, this guy had absolutely no moral compass whatsoever.
No,
And
but
had
also,
absolutely no business being out in the public.
yes, exactly. I
It
feel like this is
he
an
was failed.
instance
We were failed.
where the community, the United States, all of these women were failed by the system.
Yeah,
So he
Um,
fell through the cracks basically every
yeah,
time.
every
every
crack.
time. In 1982, he was arrested in Mississippi, and on the charges for the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Rose. And then he was extradited to Florida and tried for the murder of 26-year-old Patricia Ann Mount. And they said that due to mistrust of witness testimonies, he was acquitted.
Mm-hmm.
He was acquitted
Wow.
for 2 murders.
Because because the people I think that were testifying against him were people that were unsavory folks,
Yes.
prostitutes,
Yes.
people that didn't have a blue collar job, that
Mhm.
just weren't stand up citizens.
Citizens. Yeah.
And with that, and I hear that so many times with especially prostitutes, where just because of their, for lack of a
Job.
better word, job title,
Mm.
then they're
They said that they're
lesser than
incompetent.
human,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
um, even a prostitute can get raped. You
Right.
know, even a
Correct.
prostitute can get murdered.
Yeah.
100%.
You know, and of course, we're talking
Even
about
a
the 70s and
prostitute can be
80s.
truthful. Even a prostitute can recount what happened and
Yeah.
it
Sure,
be the truth.
Yeah.
I
sure.
mean, so
I've
it
known,
was
I mean, several in my lifetime, and I mean, that don't make them any less of a human being,
Mm-hmm.
right.
you know. Just because of their profession isn't of what the people, you know, want or
The moral
expect or
turpitude, right.
Yeah.
yeah, just because, you know, not all hookers hook for dope, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
even if they did, that doesn't make them any less of a human.
Right. It doesn't make them any less truthful.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah, and we've seen that with serial killers time and time again.
Oh yeah.
And that
Well,
seems to be their number one prey is
they
prostitutes.
a lot of people said that he had an uncanny way of finding the weakest link, and he
Mm-hmm.
would find himself surrounded by people that were the weakest link, and that was the
Right.
people that
Yeah.
he took advantage of. That was the people that he you know counted on, really, to be his alibi, to be his way out, and it
Right.
was unbeknownst to them. So unfortunate but true.
Yes. So then in 1984, he decides he's going to move to California, and he stays around the San Diego area.
Which is the serial killer capital of the world
Yes.
at this
Right.
point,
Yeah.
right now.
Especially in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yes. And he got arrested for kidnapping 22-year-old Lori Barros.
Hmm.
And he actually attempted to kill her. And I kind of dove deep into, kind of what had happened to her. And she, what was she walking home? I think she was walking home, and he kind of just like overtook her and
Hmm.
grabbed her by her throat and her wrists and drug her to his car. Was it a Thunderbird?
It was a
It
Thunderbird.
was a Thunderbird. And he pulled her pantyhose off of her, and he used that to kind of bind her arms behind her back. And she said that he was flaccid, and he tried oral, and that didn't work either. And then he started to strangle her, and then he become erect. So that's really what,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
So again, we're talking about sexual fantasy.
oh yeah,
Well, type. I mean,
yeah,
it's more like Gabby said, it is more of a control thing.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And he would strangle her, and then he would let her get some air back in and strangle her again, until he thought that she had been
He was
strangled to
dead.
death. Yeah,
Hmm.
he thought that she was gone. And when she came back this time, she didn't come back like gasping for air, but she came back to where, like, you know how you're like half asleep and you're like, you
Right.
kind of know
Yeah.
what's going on? That's kind of how it was. And so he thought she was dead. He gets off, he finishes what he needs to do, and he just pushes her out of the
Sets
car.
her out like trash.
Yep, sets her out like trash. And then, once she knows that the car is gone, she, gets up and stumbles away. But it's crazy to me that he wasn't charged with like attempted murder. That's crazy to me
He
because
was.
he
He
thought
was
he was
charged.
dead.
I mean, he
But he
was
wasn't
charged,
convicted of
but he
attempted
wasn't
murder.
convicted because of that female. And then the other female that he assaulted, they were the witnesses in that
Mm,
those
yeah.
charges, and the jury found them to be non-credible, and
Mm.
he got off. Sorry about that term, but he got,
Yeah.
he was
Right.
not convicted
Yeah.
for either of those. But but justice did come back, because when he was in prison for the last three that he was actually convicted of, DNA linked him to both of
Yes.
those females,
Yes.
and they were able to have their day in court with him, and they
And
were
they were
able to say
confirmed.
their piece, and
Yep.
they were able to do the things they needed to do and didn't get the opportunity to
Yep.
do
And
whenever, he
how
got
Yeah.
him the
many
first
times
time. But
have we seen that these guys that are investigating these murder slash serial killer type things had the whereabouts about them to save
hmm
bits of clothing with DNA on them,
hmm
and knowing that maybe in the future
can't do
that
anything with that right now, but
yeah,
Yes. In the future. Yep. That's
and
good
that
planning.
has caught so
hmm
many
Yes.
serial killers over the past few
hmm
years where they have
Yep.
saved this DNA that they didn't even know was
cigarette
coming.
butt. I mean,
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, even
that.
BTK, they
yeah,
were able to use that against him. DNA.
right.
Well, the guy that the rapist up in San Diego or up in San Francisco, the California guy,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
they saved that stuff for
Dating.
years, and all of a sudden,
hmm
hey, this guy's 70
He
years
lights it up
old,
like a
Mhm.
Christmas tree.
and
Yep.
now your DNA is all over every one of these murders.
Right,
And guess what, Jack? You can't hide from DNA.
right.
Hmm.
So
So
Yep.
that was in
that's just
October. He was arrested for kidnapping her. And then in November, um, he was found by police in the back seat of his car with an unconscious woman beaten and strangled. And he
hmm
served a whole whopping 2.5 years for both of those crimes together.
Right.
wow.
Yep. And then February 1987, he moves to LA and he commits at least 10 murders in LA.
So
Which again, we're talking about the
all of
serial
those could
killer
have been
or the
avoided
capital of the
Yeah,
country.
they literally all could have been avoided had he
had
actually
the
served.
criminal justice
Yeah,
system done its job
yeah,
the first 20 times that he was in front of
exactly.
them.
Yep.
Wow.
Um, so then September 5th, 2020 or 2012, he was actually at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky, and he
hmm
was extradited to California.
Dude, that's less
Um,
than 100 miles from us.
right, right.
Well, that's where he
Well,
was getting his Social Security benefits.
yeah,
That was where his address was for him to get
in
his,
Ohio,
so,
yeah.
yep, Social Security benefits
And
and
he killed multiple women in Akron, Ohio, Cincinnati, Columbus,
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
With that, and I don't know, this may not be anything together, but we have had a serial killer around Chillicothe, Ohio,
Yes.
where
hmm
there's been several women found, and with
Hmm.
that, between Akron and Cincinnati, guess what's in the middle?
hmm
That kind of, hey,
Yeah.
that may
Yeah,
be
it's a little
worth taking
scary.
a look at.
Yeah. But he was extradited to California to face a narcotics charge. And then the FBI used his DNA then to establish his involvement in lots of different murders. Um, he so the first ones were Linda Alford, Guadalupe Apodaca,
Apodaca.
Close enough.
Yep. No, that's
um,
exactly right.
yeah,
Good job.
Audrey Everett. Um, he was extradited to LA from there. He was charged January 7th, 2013. Um, and they were investigating for involvement in dozens of murders in the 1980s. And then finally, September 25th, 2014, which is so close to our current time. Like this was only 11
Yeah.
years ago. Like it literally still blows my mind that we didn't know who this was.
hmm
And so he was uh, found guilty, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And that was for 3 murders
And it was in
that were
Ohio,
proven
No,
with
that was in
DNA.
Cali.
Yes,
California. Okay.
yes.
hmm
And on the day of that verdict, he maintained his innocence. I didn't do nothing. And then finally, in 2018, he starts opening up. He starts spilling it all. And I read that it's because he didn't want to have to serve out his life sentence at that facility.
He
So
wanted to
he's
be
like,
moved.
yes, he wanted to be moved to a different facility. So he's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you all of these confessions.
We'll make a deal.
That's right. And so then all of these people start coming out with, press releases. Texas District Attorney and Sheriff's Office announced November 13th that, there were dozens of murders, and there may have been he may have committed more than 90 across 15 states in between 1970 and 2005. And then
The
there
cool part
was,
about it that I think is that he didn't open up really to anyone until he was approached by this random female
yes,
whose husband is the bassist for the band Weezer, which I love and I've seen in concert several times, who reached out to him to get some information that she was writing a book for. And basically, he kind of fell in love with her and telling all of his biz, and literally gave her all the information.
Wow.
he became obsessed with her, but she also became obsessed with him. So yeah, like I said, everybody just starts coming out with all of these press releases, and there's just dozens and dozens over the course of like that next couple of weeks.
Right.
But overall, he was convicted of 8 murders. He got 4
Mhm.
life sentences. The 8 murders were California, Texas, Ohio. He claimed he was suspected of killing 93 people. 60 of those were confirmed. And like I said, there were lots and lots. There was Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, North Carolina. Like, it just goes on and on.
And
So he should have
And I
been
would
named
love,
Chandler.
yes, and I would love to recognize all of these
all
women
the victims.
that have
Right.
lost their lives, but there's just
Yeah.
not enough time for that.
Yeah, exactly. So
But he died December 30th, 2020 in a Los Angeles hospital. They couldn't find a cause of death. He was 80 years old. He did have diabetes, heart problems, and a lot of other health conditions. And that's pretty much where the story ends.
So
We're running
now
out of time.
he's burning in hell now.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
Correct.
with that, guys, thank you so much. It's been a great show. I knew nothing about this guy until
I
Chad
hope it was
mentioned it.
interesting for you.
Yeah, and then
Yes,
you guys
crazy.
mentioned it. So be sure to check us out on nighthawk/radio.com, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. Look up Nighthawk Radio. Check out the McKenzie Hour starting next Thursday at 8. 2 Girls, 1 Cut prior to that at 7 p.m. on Thursday. Check out Joe and I on Awakening Radio Sundays at 7. We'll have Keith Age on this week. He's from the Sci-Fi Channel. And guys, that's Samuel Large. I mean,
Samuel Little, not large.
Yeah.
oh, I wrote it down wrong. So it is Samuel Little.
Little, not large. He
you
was a
guys
large
banged-
man, though.
you
Yeah.
guys banged it out. So,
That's right.
guys, remember, always look in the shadows. You never know what's going to be lurking there.
And always
So
share our stuff.
that has
Yes,
been
please.
2 Girls, 1 Cut.
One cut.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.